She sold pure water for 3 years, sacrificed everything for the man she loved, only to watch him marry her best friend. What would you do if love betrayed you like this? The sun had not fully risen yet, but Saraphina was already awake. Every morning, before the city stretched its limbs and before shop owners lifted their metal doors, she stood quietly in the small compound she shared with other struggling women. A faded plastic basin rested beside her, filled with neatly tied sachets of pure water, cold from the night air but already warming under the promise of heat. Saraphina adjusted the cloth on her head, lifted the basin with practiced balance, and began her walk. The road was long, the sun was cruel, but Saraphina never complained. She walked through dusty streets where the ground burned the soles of her feet, past buses honking impatiently, past people who barely noticed her presence. Her voice rose softly, again and again, steady like a prayer. Pure water, cold pure water. Some days she sold everything. Some days she returned home with half the basin still full and her heart even emptier. But she always returned with the same gentle smile. People in the market knew her as the quiet one, the girl who never shouted, never fought for customers, never cursed when ignored. When others pushed and argued, Saraphina simply waited. When buyers tried to cheat her, she smiled and accepted whatever they gave. Kindness was her language. Suffering was her companion. She was young, but life had already pressed heavy lines into her spirit. Her clothes were always clean but worn thin. Her hands were rough from work, her shoulders tired from carrying more than just water. Yet there was dignity in the way she walked, as if she believed, somewhere deep inside, that her life still mattered. At midday, the sun sat directly above her head, merciless and unforgiving. Sweat soaked her wrapper. Her throat burned with thirst, but she rarely drank her own water. Every sachet had a price. Every coin had a purpose. She counted money carefully at the end of each day, spreading small notes on her mat, calculating how much rice it could buy, how much kerosene she could afford, how much she could save. It was never enough, but she tried anyway. Sometimes, when exhaustion pressed too hard, Saraphina paused under a mango tree, resting the basin beside her. She would look at the sky for a brief moment, blinking back tears she refused to shed. "This is not how my life will end," she told herself. Was this really all life had planned for her? No one knew how much strength it took to wake up every day and choose hope when the world gave her none. No one knew how heavy that basin felt when dreams sat inside it, unfulfilled and fragile. But Saraphina carried on, because poor did not mean useless, and quiet did not mean weak. And though she did not know it yet, this same sun that burned her skin was silently preparing her for a fire far greater than heat. One that would test her heart, break it, and remake it into something unbreakable. Saraphina met Amari on a day when the sun was less cruel, and the market was unusually quiet. She had stopped near a roadside bench to rest her neck, gently lowering the basin of water from her head. That was when she noticed him, sitting alone, hunched over old notebooks, his shirt neatly ironed but clearly worn from many washes. His eyes were focused, serious, as if the world around him did not exist. When he looked up, their eyes met. "Pure water?" she asked softly. He smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Yes, please." As she handed him the sachet, his fingers brushed hers for a second. It was nothing, but somehow it felt like something. They spoke briefly at first. He told her his name was Amari. He was a university student, studying economics, surviving on small tutoring jobs and borrowed money. He spoke with confidence, with ambition, with dreams that sounded bigger than the dusty bench he sat on. "I won't be poor forever," he said one afternoon, almost apologetically. "One day, I will build a life that matters." Saraphina listened. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, not as a seller, not as a burden, but as a human being worthy of conversation. He asked about her day, about her life, about her name. When he laughed, she felt something unfamiliar stir inside her chest. Hope. Soon, she began stopping at that bench every day, even when it was not the fastest route to sell her water. Amari waited for her. Sometimes he bought water. Sometimes he did not. But he always listened. He told her about his dreams, about working in a bank, about wearing suits, about lifting his family out of poverty. He spoke about a future so vividly that Saraphina could almost see it. And in that future, she was there. "You are different," he once told her. "You are strong. You don't even know it." Her heart trembled. Maybe someone finally sees me, she thought. They began sharing small moments, laughing over roasted corn, walking together as the sun set, sitting quietly without needing words. Love did not arrive loudly. It came softly, like evening rain, gentle but persistent. But Amari also had nothing. No money. No connections. No certainty. Only promises. One evening, as they stood under a fading orange sky, Amari took her hands and spoke with a seriousness that made her breath catch. "If you stand by me now," he said, "I will never forget you. When I succeed, you will succeed with me." Was love supposed to feel this powerful? Saraphina nodded, not because she understood the cost, but because her heart had already chosen. She believed him, not because he was rich, but because he sounded sincere, because his dreams felt honest, because he made tomorrow feel possible. She did not see the warning signs. Love rarely allows us to. All she saw was a man reaching upward, and she was willing to become the ground beneath his feet. The letter arrived on a quiet afternoon, folded carefully in Amari's trembling hands. He stood before Saraphina with eyes shining, breath uneven, as if he was afraid the news might disappear if spoken aloud. When he finally opened the envelope and read the words, his voice cracked. "I got in," he whispered. "The university accepted me." For a moment the world stopped. Saraphina smiled so wide it almost hurt. She clapped her hands softly, joy rising in her chest like a bird finally freed. This was the dream they had talked about under fading skies and dusty benches. This was the future they had imagined together. But the joy did not last. Amari lowered himself onto a wooden stool, the letter still shaking in his fingers. His smile faded into worry. The numbers on the admission paper were clear. Tuition, accommodation, books, fees that felt heavier than the sun Saraphina carried every day. "I don't have this kind of money," he said quietly. "I don't know what to do." Silence filled the room. Saraphina's heart tightened. She looked around her small space, the cracked walls, the thin mattress, the single cooking pot. Poverty was familiar to her. But watching a dream suffocate in front of her was something else entirely. Was love meant to ask for this much? That night, Saraphina could not sleep. She lay awake listening to distant dogs bark and roofs creak in the wind. Her mind kept returning to one thing, the land. A small piece of land her father had left behind before he died. It was not much, but it was hers. Her only inheritance. Her only security. The place where her childhood memories lived. If I let this dream die, will I ever forgive myself? The next morning, she made her decision. She did not tell Amari at first. She walked alone to the village elder, her steps heavy, her chest tight. When she handed over the land papers, her hands shook. The elder looked at her with concern. "Are you sure?" he asked. Saraphina nodded, tears blurring her vision. By evening, the land was gone. She placed the money in Amari's hands that night, watching his eyes widen in disbelief. "Where did you get this?" he asked. She smiled gently. "Don't worry about it," she said. "Just go to school. Make something of yourself." Amari pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with gratitude. He promised her everything: marriage, a home, a future filled with comfort. His words poured like honey, sweet and convincing. Saraphina believed him. She ignored the small ache in her chest, the quiet grief of losing something she could never replace. She told herself it was worth it, that love meant sacrifice, that someday, when he stood tall, he would remember the woman who lifted him. As he left for university weeks later, Saraphina waved with a smile, even as her heart cracked silently. She had traded her past for his future. 3 years passed, but not gently. Time did not heal Saraphina, tested her. Every morning before the sun rose, she tied her headscarf, lifted her basin of pure water, and stepped back onto the same burning roads. The weight felt heavier now, not because the water had increased, but because life had taken so much from her body. Some days she skipped breakfast. Some days she skipped lunch. Food became something she postponed, something she sacrificed quietly so that money could be sent away. Money with Amari's name written on it in her heart. Her feet cracked from walking. Her back ached from bending. Her eyes lost their shine, but her determination did not. At night, she counted coins under dim light, calculating school fees, accommodation, textbooks. When the money was not enough, she worked harder the next day. When her body begged for rest, she ignored it. Because love had a deadline. Letters from Amari arrived at first. Long letters filled with excitement. He spoke of lecture halls, new friends, clean hostels, and bright futures. He thanked her often. He called her his backbone, his blessing. Saraphina read those letters until the paper softened in her hands. She imagined him walking across campus in clean clothes, carrying books she had paid for, drinking cold water she had not allowed herself to drink. The thought comforted her. But as time passed, the letters grew shorter. Phone calls became rushed. His voice sounded distant, busy, distracted. Sometimes days passed without a word. When she asked if everything was okay, he laughed lightly and said she worried too much. "School is stressful," he told her. "I'm doing this for us." She believed him. Wasn't love supposed to be patient? The sun seemed hotter each year. Saraphina's body grew thinner, her cheeks hollow, her strength fading. Women in the market whispered that she worked too hard. Some offered advice. Some offered pity. She only smiled. "This suffering will end when he graduates," she told herself. Meanwhile, Amari's life blossomed. He attended events. He wore better shoes. He spoke confidently of internships and opportunities. He was becoming the man he always dreamed of being. And Saraphina was becoming invisible. Yet she never missed a payment, never complained, never asked for more than a future she had already given everything to build. On her worst days, when hunger made her dizzy and exhaustion blurred her vision, she sat on the roadside and rested her head against a wall. People passed by without noticing. She stood up again, because quitting would mean everything she lost meant nothing. And so, 3 years of hunger passed. 3 years of hustle. 3 years of faith placed in someone else's success. She did not know then that the same years she spent breaking herself were also shaping the moment that would finally break her heart. The change did not arrive like thunder. Came softly, quietly, almost politely. Saraphina noticed it first in the silence between phone calls. Days passed without Amari's voice. When she finally reached him, the conversations felt rushed, unfinished, as if he was always somewhere else. "I'm busy," he would say. Classes, projects, meetings. First she understood. She always understood. But understanding began to feel heavy. In the market, the women who sold beside her watched carefully. They had lived long enough to recognize patterns love refused to see. One afternoon, as Saraphina rested her basin near a wooden stall, an older woman leaned closer. "My daughter," she said gently, "a man who loves you does not disappear." Another woman added, "Success changes people. Be careful." Saraphina smiled politely and waved their words away. "He is just focused," she said. "He is working for our future." They exchanged knowing looks. Even her closest friend began to ask questions. Why did Amari no longer visit during holidays? Why did he never talk about marriage anymore? Why did his voice sound proud, almost distant? Saraphina defended him every time. "School is not easy," she said. "He is under pressure." But at night, alone on her mat, doubt crept in. Messages she sent went unanswered for hours, sometimes days. When he finally replied, his words felt cold, short, practical. The warmth that once filled his voice was fading. Had she imagined it all? "Maybe I am asking for too much," she told herself. One evening, she overheard young girls in the market whispering about university boys who forgot their past once they tasted comfort. Their laughter cut deep, even though the words were not meant for her. Was love supposed to feel this uncertain? Amari stopped asking about her day. He stopped asking if she had eaten. He stopped calling her by the names that once made her smile. His promises became vague, pushed into a future with no date. Soon, he said often. After I settle. Soon became a word without meaning. When Saraphina tried to express her worries, Amari grew defensive. Don't stress me, he said sharply once. You know I'm trying. She apologized. Even when she felt wronged, she apologized. The market women noticed her silence growing heavier. Her smile became forced. Her eyes carried questions she was too afraid to ask out loud. Deep inside, Saraphina felt the truth forming, but she pushed it away, because accepting it would mean admitting that the man she sacrificed everything for might be leaving her behind. And that pain felt worse than hunger. So she chose faith over fear, hope over evidence, love over dignity. She refused to see the signs, not because they we. The day of Amari's graduation arrived, shining like a promise Saraphina had carried in her heart for years. She stood among the cheering families, her eyes searching for him in the crowd. When she found him, he looked different. Polished, confident, and distant, as if the boy she once knew had been replaced by someone she barely recognized. He wore his graduation gown with ease, shaking hands with professors, smiling for photos, accepting praise. Saraphina's heart swelled with pride, but a quiet ache curled in her chest. Where once he would have pulled her close, whispered gratitude, and promised a future together, now there was only polite nods and brief smiles. Is this the same man I loved? She whispered to herself. After the ceremony, they spoke briefly, exchanging pleasantries. Amari mentioned his new job at a bank, his eyes bright with ambition. I start next week, he said, adjusting his tie. It's a big step. Saraphina nodded, forcing a smile. She had imagined this moment countless times, his success and their shared joy. But instead of celebration, she felt a hollow echo where their closeness used to be. His words were sharp, precise, almost rehearsed. He's not the same man I waited for, she thought, biting her lip to hold back tears. Days passed, and Saraphina tried to reach him, sending messages brimming with excitement, planning for their wedding, dreaming aloud about the future. Replies came slowly, sometimes only a few words. Busy? Talk later. We'll see. The silence was louder than any words. Amari no longer asked about her day, her work, or her health. The warmth they once shared had faded into a polite distance that felt deliberate. Even in the market, as Saraphina poured water for customers, she noticed whispers from the women who had long watched her journey. He's moved on in heart, one said softly. Not yet in word, but soon. Saraphina shook her head, clinging to hope. She reminded herself of the sacrifices she had made. The land sold, the years of hunger, the endless work. All of it had been for love, for a future she still believed in. Yet, each unanswered call, each delayed reply, each fleeting interaction was a reminder that love alone sometimes isn't enough to keep two hearts together. She continued planning the wedding herself, decorating the hall in her imagination, selecting colors, dreaming of a celebration that might never come. Every flower, every ribbon, every thought of their life together was tinged with both hope and fear. Had she misread his ambition for affection? Had she given her all to someone whose heart had quietly drifted away? I can't stop loving him, even if he no longer loves me, she admitted silently, holding on to the pieces of hope that refused to break. Saraphina had been humming softly as she arranged the few flowers left from her modest wedding preparations, her heart still clinging to the fragile hope that Amari would return her love. The afternoon sun filtered through the window, painting the room in warm gold, and for a moment, everything felt calm. Then the mail arrived. A single envelope, heavy in her hands, addressed in a familiar, confident script. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, expecting a confirmation of the wedding they had dreamed about together. But the moment she unfolded the card, her heart froze. There, in elegant letters, were words she never imagined seeing. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of Amari and Layla. Her breath caught. She blinked, thinking perhaps it was a cruel mistake, a trick of her weary mind. But no, the names were clear, precise, and final. Layla, her best friend, the girl she had laughed with, cried with, and trusted most in the world, was now standing in the place Saraphina had envisioned for herself. Why? She whispered to the empty room. Why would he do this? Tears blurred her vision as she sank onto the worn wooden chair. Her hands shook, the invitation trembling between them, as if it were a physical weight crushing her chest. The years of struggle, the sacrifices she had made for him, the nights she had gone hungry so he could eat and study, they all seemed to mock her now. How could love hurt this much? She thought, her mind spinning. I gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. The sounds of the bustling market outside seemed distant, muted by the roar of her heartbreak. Memories of his smile, his promises, and their whispered dreams haunted her, twisting sharply into bitter reality. Each memory was a reminder of how deeply she had believed, and how thoroughly she had been left behind. For a long moment, Saraphina could do nothing but stare at the invitation, the words blurring as tears fell freely. The room felt impossibly small, her chest heavy, and the future she had imagined evaporating like mist in the sunlight. She had pictured joy, laughter, and love, but now she faced betrayal, a quiet cruelty delivered by the one she had trusted most. Yet, even in her devastation, a small spark of dignity remained. Saraphina knew that no man, not even one she loved, could define her worth. Her sacrifices had shaped her into someone resilient, someone capable of surviving heartbreak and still standing tall. Slowly, she folded the invitation, tucking it away not in bitterness, but as a reminder of her strength. The pain was sharp, yes, but it would not break her spirit. She would rise again, not for him, not for anyone, but for herself. Could love truly teach us the hardest lessons in life? She murmured, letting a single tear slide down her cheek. The church was silent, filled with the soft rustle of guests adjusting in their seats, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Saraphina's heart pounded in her chest like a drum, each beat louder than the last. She had rehearsed these words 1,000 times in her head, but now that she stood at the entrance, the reality of facing Amari made her knees tremble. He stood at the altar, polished and proud in his crisp suit, smiling at the crowd, but his eyes were cold when they met hers. The warmth, the love she had once known in those eyes, had vanished completely. Saraphina's voice shook as she called out his name. Amari, we need to talk now. A hush fell over the room. The guests turned, whispers spreading like wildfire. Amari looked down his nose at her, a smirk curling on his lips. Saraphina, he said slowly, his voice dripping with disdain. What are you doing here? You don't belong in this place with people of my status. Her chest tightened. Her mouth opened to reply, but no words came. Humiliation flooded her, stronger than the heat of the sun she had endured for years selling water. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every meal she had skipped to support him, seemed meaningless in that instant. How could someone I loved so deeply turn against me so cruelly? She thought, her heart splintering. The guests' eyes were on her now, some filled with pity, others with shock. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, but she refused to let it define her. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her chin, letting the tears fall freely, but without hiding her face. Amari, she said, her voice firm despite the quiver. I gave you everything, and yet you have nothing but cruelty for me. But know this, I am worth more than the love you never truly had. Amari's smirk faltered, but he quickly masked it with arrogance. He gestured toward Layla, who now looked uncomfortable in her bridal gown, and announced loudly, See, this is the future I choose. You, Saraphina, are part of the past, a past I have outgrown. Saraphina felt a wave of anger, sadness, and disbelief, but beneath it all, a flicker of freedom sparked within her. She realized that his words, meant to break her, could not take away her dignity. She had loved, sacrificed, and endured, and that strength belonged to her alone. Turning away from the altar, she walked with steady steps down the aisle, her eyes on the light streaming through the stained glass windows, not on the man who had betrayed her. With each step, the weight of humiliation lifted, replaced by a quiet, unshakable resolve. Could pain truly forge the courage I never knew I had? She wondered, letting the thought guide her. The world seemed to tilt and spin around Saraphina as she stepped out of the church, the echoes of Amari's cruel words still ringing in her ears. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she collapsed onto the cold stone steps, tears mingling with the dust of her journey. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows that mirrored the weight of her heart. In that moment, she felt utterly broken, every hope she had nurtured over 3 long years crushed into silence. Why did love have to feel like this? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible, carried away by the gentle evening breeze. But even in the depths of despair, a quiet strength began to stir within her. Slowly, painfully, she raised her head, then her shoulders, and finally, her feet. Each movement was a declaration. She would not be defined by betrayal. Saraphina's eyes, once clouded with grief, now held a glimmer of determination, a fire that no humiliation could extinguish. While Saraphina found her footing, the winds of life were shifting in Amari's world. The polished student, once admired for his charm and ambition, began to stumble. The bank position he had proudly claimed seemed less secure, his colleagues whispering behind his back. Layla, too, discovered cracks in the relationship she had built on deceit. Slowly, the carefully constructed facade of wealth, power, and status began to crumble. Karma, patient and inevitable, moved silently, yet unmistakably, in the lives of those who had wronged others. Saraphina watched from a distance, though not with vindictive satisfaction, but with quiet realization. Life had a way of balancing itself. She felt the bitter weight of her past sorrows lighten, replaced by a steady hope. With each breath, she embraced the possibility of a future that was truly hers, free from manipulation, free from betrayal. Perhaps true strength is not avoiding pain, but rising despite it, she thought, letting the words settle in her heart. She walked away from the ruins of the life she had once imagined with Amari, carrying only what was essential: her dignity, her courage, and the lessons of her sacrifices. The streets that had witnessed her struggle, the sun that had tested her resolve, and the water she had sold to survive, all became symbols of endurance, not defeat. As the days turned into weeks, Saraphina rebuilt her life, slowly but surely. She found opportunities that respected her worth, friendships that honored her heart, and a purpose that no one could take away. Meanwhile, Amari and Layla faced the consequences of choices made in haste and selfishness, learning the hard truth that deception cannot endure. The sun streamed through the tall glass windows of Saraphina's new office, catching the gleam of polished floors and the organized rows of shelves filled with her products. What once had been a simple life of selling water under the scorching sun had transformed into something far greater. Saraphina, now a confident and successful businesswoman, walked briskly through the space, her head held high, a quiet smile gracing her lips. Every decision she had made, every sacrifice endured, had led her here. She paused at her desk, looking at a photograph of her younger self, sunburned, tired, but undaunted, and felt a surge of pride. All those days of struggle were not in vain, she thought, a soft warmth spreading through her chest. She had learned to value herself, to recognize her own worth beyond the dreams she had poured into someone else. Then, as if the universe was testing her newfound strength, the office door opened. Amari stepped in, his polished suit and nervous glance betraying both confidence and desperation. "Saraphina, I need you," he began, his voice almost pleading. But she did not falter. She remembered the years of toil, the nights spent hungry, the emotional pain, and the betrayal that had cut her deeply. "Why should I let the past dictate my future?" she asked herself silently, her heart steady. She met his gaze calmly, without anger or bitterness, only firm resolve. Amari, she said softly, I once gave you everything I had. I believed in us. But those days are gone. I am no longer the girl who waited silently while you chose someone else. Her words were gentle yet unyielding, carrying the weight of self-respect and the clarity of lessons learned. Amari's shoulders slumped, the bravado he once held so tightly now crumbling. He had returned seeking comfort, forgiveness, perhaps even reconciliation. But Saraphina understood something he never could. Her peace, her dignity, and her self-worth were not for sale. They were earned through perseverance, courage, and a refusal to compromise her soul for anyone's approval. Turning back to her work, she smiled at a staff member passing by, the simple act of moving forward her loudest statement. The city beyond her windows seemed brighter, each ray of sunlight a testament to her journey. From sacrifice to triumph, from heartache to self-respect. Life had given her a second chance, and she embraced it fully, unburdened by the past and focused on the limitless horizon ahead.